Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to our session, Go Beyond Chat, Proactive and Ambient Agent Patterns. Um, Before we get started, I do want to remind you all that Salesforce is a publicly traded company. Please do not make any purchasing decisions based on anything that is not GA. We don't really have much of that in this deck, but wanted to remind you if you didn't know. And I want to start off with a thank you. Thank you for coming to TDX this year. Thank you for coming to this session. I know we're just after lunch, so really appreciate that. And above all, I want to thank you for coming into the Architect Vista area. The best part about this arena is that we really encourage participation. So we will be sharing real life implementations of Agentforce with you, and we really hope to hear about your use cases, your jobs to be done. So I'll kind of cue you and let you know when we get to that part of the session. We'll have runners, so just be prepared for that. Don't be shy. We're really looking forward to discussing with you. A little bit about myself. My name is Michelle Long. I am a senior solution architect here at Salesforce. Just celebrated 5 years, and I'm on the innovation design team. Thanks, Scott. And my background is in Experience Cloud and knowledge product implementations, and then of course, I've really enjoyed implementing Agentforce at various different places within our ecosystem. And I'll hand it over to my colleague, Scott.
Hi, my name is Scott Ratliff. I'm at Salesforce for 7.5 years. Recently, I joined the Architect Evangelist team as a principal architect evangelist. But prior to that, I was working with Michelle for almost 5 years actually.
Yeah.
For almost your entire time, just within professional services on practice enablement.
All right, so let's get started. So why are we here today? Many of us have been treating AI like a sidekick. We're stuck in the conversational pattern where our agent is waiting for requests in order to respond to us. But a conversational agent pattern isn't the best way to get a lot of jobs done. What I'm going to talk to you about today is when to bring your agent out of the chat box and into the fold. When to create a super squad, first responder heroes, proactive agents that respond the moment a bat signal hits your system. So responding to discrete events in your CRM. We're also going to talk about ambient agent patterns. When to create a silent guardian that executes work in the background without ever being asked. But a super squad like this needs a leader. Putting human at the helm isn't about doing the heavy lifting. It's about using the strategic best practices during your design phase to ensure your agents work within the context, ethics, and guardrails that you expect. So let's get started. So this is the agenda for today. First, we're going to define these agentic patterns. If you haven't heard about them before, I think it'll be very insightful. A lot of you know about conversational patterns, but we're going to talk about proactive and ambient patterns. And then we're going to talk about the shift between human at the loop and human at the helm, and the mental shift and the design patterns that you would really want to employ as your agents become more and more autonomous. Because in the proactive and ambient agent patterns, your agent is acting based on those system events or based on a live stream of data. So kind of new for everyone. And then after that, we're going to get into an architectural decisioning discussion. How do you get from a job to be done, a business use case, a business process, and determine which pattern to use? And spoiler alert, your agent probably is going to do multiple patterns. So this is more at that action sub-agent level. So I want you to keep that in mind. It's not that your agent is only ever conversational or your agent is only ever proactive. You really will be merging these patterns together based on the job being accomplished. All right, so I'll hand it over to Scott to kick us off.
Great, thank you. So we're going to talk about those three agents as Michelle had mentioned. So we're just going to do a really high-level view of them. So we have our conversational, proactive, and ambient agents. So one thing to note before we get started on this is we're not talking about actual agent types, right? So it's not talking about employee agents versus service agents. These are patterns. So each agent could actually fulfill multiple patterns as it goes through its life cycle. And so it's just, and sometimes you may want to use your own agent for some of these interactions. So with that, we're going to go to the next slide, which is the conversational agent. So this is the most familiar agent that you have, right? So everyone's been there before. You open up a window, and an agent comes in and says, "Hello, I'm here. What do you got? What do you got for me?" And so with this one, it is the agent doesn't interact with you. You interact with it, and then it gives you the response. So a couple of things here. Most of the time, you see the agent answering questions. What's the status of my order? Something along those lines. And that's like more knowledge-based. But as you can see on this one here, that there's actually a workflow. I want to submit an asset, and what are the next steps? So the agent knows that kind of cycle through. But all this interaction only happens when I start the process. And so the next two agents we're going to talk about are going to be more autonomous. And so the one thing to kind of talk about at this point is the difference between human in the loop and human at the helm. So with a conversational agent, human in the loop is constant interaction. Nothing happens unless I kind of make it go. And with the human at the helm, there's a shift, right? So it's not about like 100% interaction anymore. We want to focus on the total outcome of the process. So what are the things that it's not about each of the step of the way anymore. It's what's that overall process looks like, and whether that outcome is successful, and then what are the guardrails that I need to apply in order to make the agent behave the way I want it to behave while I'm not at the helm or while I'm not in the loop. So next we're going to talk about the first of our kind of autonomous patterns, which is the proactive agent pattern. This is very different than the conversational agent because now we're talking about some other trigger. So something else is getting that agent to wake up and do something. So with proactive agents, it could be something like a trigger, some notification firing. There's something in there that's going to happen that's going to make that agent do what it needs to do. So you can see here, new sample deliverable is available for your review. I've reviewed it and recommend approval based on this criteria. So it's not just a simple notification, right? It's not something happened, I need to tell the human to do something. There's stuff that happens in between that. So in this case, somebody publishes an article or submits an article for review, and the agent could go through and actually read the entire content. And if it says, oh, the person just fixed some grammatical errors, or maybe they changed one word here or there, number one is it could either, depending on the guardrails, it can go through and say, I'm just going to mark this as reviewed and go forward, or it could come say, there's enough changes in here that I think I want to get a human involved. Then you get the notification. And so some of the things to talk about with human in the helm for proactive agents, the first thing is trust is a marathon, right? I'm not going to create a proactive agent and say, hey, do all my work for me because I'm going to go to the beach. Instead, I want to start off very much human in the loop on that. I don't trust the agent to do the reviews for me. I want to make sure I'm doing it. And I want the agent to kind of learn how I'm doing those reviews, and then I can adjust my guardrails to take me out of the loop a little bit, because I don't want to be involved in every single one of these interactions. And so as you go from the human in the loop mindset, you go into this confidence indicator. And the confidence indicator is, hey agent, if you can handle 90% of this, then go ahead and do it, but it's going to come at like my kind of guidance. The next is explainability, right? So with a conversational agent, you're going to see things like, I want to look at this knowledge article, or I want to edit this knowledge article, and it's very specific, and I'm the one dictating where it's going. The proactive agent says, hey, something has happened, I need you to be involved. And when that happens, it's very important to get those cited sources. What was the opportunity that was triggered that caused the agent to interact? What happened in there? What are the knowledge bases that it pulled its knowledge into to answer those questions or to determine whether or not it needs to bring the human involved? And lastly is those guardrails, right? We talked about those guardrails. We don't want to give the agent full autonomy. And so with the guardrails, we want to prioritize low risk and high risk. If it's a low risk, maybe it's okay to be autonomous, right? So you're a gold member, loyalty member at a place, and you come into the building and we want to offer you a 10% discount. Relatively low risk. But it's very different to say, oh, looks like you're trading some stock a lot. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and accelerate some of those sales for you. That is not something we want autonomy to happen with. And then with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle for ambient patterns.
All right. So ambient agent patterns. Unlike conversational agents that are responding to your requests and proactive agents that are kicked off from events in your CRM or a time trigger, ambient agents actually work off of live streams of data. So think of them as kind of nanobots operating in the background, performing intuitive tasks that you have to do repetitively. And so I'm going to talk through an example here. So imagine that you are on a service call and you have a customer talking to you about a credit card dispute. And so you're having this live conversation, and in the old paradigm, you might have to be searching around for a knowledge playbook to figure out how to respond, what kind of questions to ask. And the last thing you're probably thinking about is next best steps, opportunities to upsell, something like that. But here comes in Salesforce Voice. Salesforce Voice is a great example of an agent using the ambient pattern. So what Salesforce Voice will do is it listens to your conversation and translates that into text. You see that on the screen here. So you can see that the conversations between what the customer is telling you and how you're responding. That agent is looking out for keywords like credit card dispute. And based on those keywords, it silently serves you up knowledge articles to reference and use to respond to the to the customer. Not only that, it's thinking, oh, maybe this customer is might be interested into some identity protection packages or different additional things that you could sell to them. And so that's what that next best action is up there. It's asking you to go ahead and propose scheduling a time to kind of follow up. And so show of hands, has anyone used an agent like this? Has anyone designed an ambient agent?
One.
Okay, all right, somebody. So it is fairly new. I think one use case, just to add some more color, is if anyone uses Gemini Meet. That's another example of an ambient agent. Gemini is working in the background, listening to your conversation. If you join a meeting late, it'll often be like, do you want to be caught up and that kind of thing. And you've seen in keynotes how we're applying the same concepts to Slackbot as well. So that's an ambient pattern. So with more autonomy comes the need for human at the helm best practices. So as Scott mentioned, with proactive agents, there are some that we really recommend for your ambient agents. And the first one here is motivate over mandate. So you don't want an agent just giving you all these intrusive pop-ups, do this, do that, kind of in your way of work. What you really want is suggestions. As you saw on that last screen, it was kind of off to the side. If you use Gemini, it is kind of quietly there, something that you can use or ignore. One example that we kind of recommend is this idea of verbosity sliders. So being able to say, oh, I want a lot of suggestions or I want just a little bit. And that can also be done with just being able to minimize the agent as well. Another thing you want to think about is A for efficiency. So you want to be able to correct your agent in real time as much as possible. Now this can be difficult to achieve, but our recommendation is to support the idea of micro edits. So if you have someone taking your chat transaction, at the exact same time, you should be able to correct the agent and be like, oh no, you spelled MuleSoft wrong, or her name is actually Alyssa, not some kind of misspelled word. I'm sure you guys have seen transcripts that kind of just get it wrong, and you really do want to provide those micro edits. A more practical example, I think, in the Agentforce world is something like designing your agent so that users can update things very easily. You want to think about a draft mode before you kind of send things out to larger mass or maybe save your record. So that would be another example of this A for efficiency best practice being applied. Final one here is going to be your help me help you. And I'm really passionate about this. So a lot of people will see thumbs up, thumbs down icons, right? And we recommend that. We recommend that at the granular level so that you can kind of capture feedback of each response of your agent. But that's not enough, right? We really need to talk about your strategy of using that feedback and setting up a team, empowering individuals to analyze that feedback, follow up with end users. I know that's difficult, but that's where kind of that agent force traceability kind of comes in, so you can like dig in and find out who is Jane Doe. Let me invite them to our next workshop. Let me apply some design thinking workshops to these individuals that are having unhelpful or kind of have poor opinions of the agent, and these sessions that don't end as we expect, and bring them in to feedback, because agent force is not meant to be do it once, right? We need to think about iterative, continuous improvement with our agents, and help me help you kind of embodies that. So you really need to think about feedback, and then what are you going to do with that feedback, and how to bring the product team and make them aware of that feedback. Okay, so now we're going to get into our architectural decisioning discussion, and we're going to talk about how do you get from a job to be done, something you want your agent to do, and figure out what's the best pattern, because you can implement the conversational pattern every time, but it doesn't always make sense. And so we're going to talk about how to kind of make those decisions and what factors to consider. I also would like you guys to kind of start thinking about your jobs to be done, because we will be asking you guys, so we can figure out patterns that you might want to use. Alrighty. So I won't drain this slide. I'm going to walk on over to the light board. Okay. So here we have our considerations, and we kind of, it boils down to the big four. We have data autonomy, right? And what we mean by this is, does the agent have all the data it needs without asking the user for something specific to complete the job? And this can be difficult. You kind of have to think about current state versus future state. So you might need to get creative, but I'll show you how that works in practice. The next consideration you're going to want to think about is the trigger point. Does this job to be done, is it triggered by a human? Is it already something that people are requesting? Does it kind of start off from the user, or is it something that can be triggered by an event in your CRM, or based on a live event or live streams of data? The next one to consider is your user experience. Is there expectations for push notifications for that job to be done, or is there a central location that the user usually goes to perform that work? And finally,
most important,
what is our value driver? What is the goal of agentifying this work? And some details we had on the screen, conversational agent patterns, one of the big value drivers there is reducing clicks and increasing the intelligence of the response. So you're replacing maybe a phone call with a single touch agent. You're replacing clicking through to return orders or something like that with, again, that single touch. Well, with the proactive and ambient, it's more about doing preemptive tasks and working on reducing cognitive load of your employees. So something to keep in mind. So I'll go through 3 quick jobs to be done, so you kind of get an idea of how this works. So something I hope none of you have had to do, but one kind of business process is, I've lost my badge and I need to request a new one. So I'm going to draw out that process diagram. So how does that start? Well, you lost your badge. And the first thing you're going to do when you've lost your badge is you're going to contact the security team, right? And the security team, now the security team is notified. And once they know, they're going to ask you a bunch of different questions. What happened? They're probably going to validate your identity. They're going to need to know, are you going to go into the office to get the badge, or are they going to mail it to you? So I'm just going to sum that up to Q&A. And once all that's done, they're going to authorize a replacement. Okay, so this is a UPN diagram of that business process. So the next step is, all right, I want to agentify this process. Which pattern should I use for this? And the first thing you want to consider here is that data autonomy. Could the agent get to authorizing the return without asking the user for follow-up details? No, right? So it's a very unique process. Every user is going to have a different variation of responses to those questions from the security team. And so based on that alone, it really does indicate that also would be a conversational pattern that works very well with a conversational agent. The next one is trigger point. Our users aren't really expecting someone else to tell them they lost their badge. It could happen, but generally, that 80-20 rule is that you notice your badge is lost, and you are going to go report that and kick off this process. So that right there, we didn't even need to get through all four. It indicates a conversational pattern would be the best use case for this. So let's look at another example. What if we want to draft a personalized email to a new lead? So I'll draw that. So we have our new lead, keeping it simple. And the next thing, the what, is we're going to draft our email. And why are we drafting that email? To kick off the engagement, right? And this is very high level. For those who work in UPN, you would definitely have a lot of deeper diagrams for this, but I want to keep it general. So looking at this process, there's a lot of ways to capture new lead information, and I'm going to go ahead and assume that you're creating records, right? So based on that, we've got our records. We need to draft these new emails, and our goal is to kick off engagement. So let's go ahead and look at our considerations. Again, data autonomy. Can the agent draft your email with all the data, with the data it has, right? And in this scenario, yes. You have your lead information in your CRM. You can easily build a prompt that has information like the voice you like to use or the email templates you like to use. That's already there. There's no reason for a user to be notified in this process until that email is done. And you could build a conversational agent. Like you could say, oh, go to the agent, hey, can you draft a lead email for me? But why would you do that? That's another step in a process is going to be kicked off every time. Next consideration, trigger point. So what is the trigger point for this? It's not really about the user. It's this record. There's a system event. Maybe it's the status on your lead has changed. There's no reason, again, to force the user to kick it off. We don't need this sidekick waiting for us. We can bring in our first responder to do the work for us. And finally, value driver. I'm going to skip to value driver for this. Why would you agentify this process? It's not to reduce clicks. It's not about kind of a smarter response because there's not really a conversational element going on there. You're not working with a bunch of different teams. It's about reducing cognitive load. It's about not doing the donkey work, as I borrow from MuleSoft, right? You're going to do this every time. Why should you have to, repetitively do this task? Final example that I want to go through.
Before you go into that, I just want a couple of questions here. This is a really good example. I mean, one of the things to note is, we're kind of very familiar with here, this isn't a person creating the lead. This could be a badge scan. This could be something that is truly like a proactive, where there isn't a human that was involved prior to this. But I think this is a really good example of human at the helm, right? So in this process, as it is fully autonomous, we're sending, anytime somebody's badge gets scanned, the person gets an email, right? If you have a lifelong customer, a high-level, platinum-level customer, do you think we want to send them a lead email? Probably not, right? Because we've already introduced themselves. Maybe it's a new contact with that lead. Maybe at this point, the agent goes, this is a brand new lead at a brand new company. Go ahead and send this kind of like generic introduction email. But if it's not, if it's like an existing customer, maybe I want to escalate out to the human to say, hey, this person just scanned their lead. I think it might be a great chance to re-interact with them, but I want some sort of specialized touch here. Sorry, go ahead.
No, thank you, Scott. Yes, so again, you want to, in this design phase, think about your human at the helm best practices. So the last one I'll illustrate before we hear use cases from you is automating your RAID log. So every day we are all on projects and we have a daily stand-up where we talk about different things that eventually translate into risks, issues, decisions, etc. So I'm going to draw that out. So how does that kick off? Well, you have your meeting. And then what happens, and I'm going to keep it high level, you have your meeting and you're logging these things. Sometimes it's just a mental note depending upon how fast you're going. Log. And why are you doing that? You want to, keep your team aligned, and you want to inform your PM if they're not already on the call. So again, high-level process here. So how would you identify this? So the thing that I really draw into, on top of the fact that this is a live meeting, so we're talking about live streams of data, which just naturally gravitate towards an ambient pattern, is really going to be the value driver. So why would you identify a process like this? Again, it's not to reduce clicks. We're not clicking around. It is to it's to respond to a live event, doing tasks that you would be doing every day. So again, eliminating that donkey work in response to live streams of data. And that's really the kind of the key difference between your proactive and ambient. Are you dealing with live or near real-time data that you need to respond to, or is it just a more singular event that you need to respond to? So those are our examples, and now we'd love to hear some jobs to be done from you, and then we can kind of talk through which pattern would fit best. So please raise your hand, and one of our mic runners will come out to you. Yeah, here in the front.
I can raise it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're Fundingo. We service a lot of lending clients that go through origination. So the system may identify that the loan application came in with a missing document and has to go out and get it.
Okay. So I'm going to draw that. So it sounded like the trigger point is we have this lending document. Okay, so once we get our lending document, what happens?
We identify it's missing pages or missing.
So we analyze the document.
We analyze the document.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then why are we analyzing that?
To make sure it has all the info we need to make a credit decision.
Okay. Credible doc. Okay, great. That's a great business process here. So looking at our criteria, I would start with data autonomy. So you need your agent to credify this document. Does it have all of the data it needs to do that? Well, it's got your document to start off with. You can add some analysis prompting, so you can tell it, analyze based on, different different rules or feature sets, common things like voice and grammar and that kind of thing. You don't really need to ask anybody. You don't need to ask the user about details for this process. The other thing I would think about is user experience. With this situation, I think you would expect, your business groups would expect, hey, notification, your document's ready, or even thinking about best practices, maybe a confidence score of, hey, I found these issues. I think that a human needs to follow up on them, but for the most part, this document is ready. I think that with those two considerations, that this is a great proactive pattern.
Yeah, because I would add to it that like if you know that there's 10 documents that are needed, or there's a knowledge article that says there's 10 documents needed, and you have 8 of them, I think the big thing there with guardrails especially is like, can I this the data autonomy? Can I get that information from someplace else? Is there another document that's in my system that I can maybe fill in that one?
Yeah.
Or is it important enough that the salesperson or the loan administrator has to reach back out to the person to get that information? And so you may choose to escalate to a human to have that interaction, or you may have like your proactive agent would just say, here's the 7 documents you need to have. You got 5 of them. Can you please provide the additional 2?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So everything you described, in a sense, could have been done with Flows and Apex 10 years ago. So what is the agentic part of that?
So the agentic part would be kind of that analysis, right? So you would have to, there's probably some rules that you're looking at. It sounds like, there's a certain amount of like, we're looking for blank context, but I think where the LLM would play in is if you had, we're looking to follow some specific rule, grammar, broken links. It depends on your document. So that's a really great point. We are kind of assuming that you want to apply AI, but it's important not to forget about those declarative options. So,
but a good part there though is it's more about just 5 out of 7, right? If you have 7 out of 7 diagram or documents, but the 6th document is just me saying, hello, loan guy, thanks for giving me your intention. I'm not going to count that as one of the documents, right? So you may want to have that document analysis in there, and the agent does a really good job of reading a document and then determining whether or not it's been properly filled in.
Yeah. Anyone else with a use case?
I'm going to raise.
Does it work? Yeah, it works. Assuming we are listening to an invoice channel, so invoices are coming in. And now we want to figure out if there are any changes, like a new region, smaller amounts, or some kind of pattern changes over the previous kind of month or weeks.
Okay, and I didn't quite get that. So it sounds like there's invoices coming in.
Yes.
And what are you doing once they come in?
I want to know from the system if something changed in there.
Okay, so
Like
you're
just
doing
like
a comparison between.
Yeah, just kind of let me know if there's something changed. Again, it could be smaller invoices, different areas, different industries, different things.
That makes sense. I'll put that on the board. So your invoice is coming in. You're doing some analysis. Are the other invoices already in your system? Yeah. And why are you doing that?
Just curious.
Just curious? Okay,
Seeing
all right.
Patterns changing.
Okay, well, so I do question value driver, but I'll skip that one. So I think here you would really cue into the trigger consideration. So you can trigger this agent off of simply uploading your invoice. You don't need the user to kind of come to your agent and say, can you please analyze this invoice? Now you can do that. Like I said, it's not, it's not always black and white. But I would say based on the trigger, if you know every invoice needs this analysis done, then why not trigger just based off of that upload versus, kind of in my first diagram, stopping, telling your sidekick, hey, you need to do this, save my cat, when you're going to do this analysis every time. So again, I would call that proactive.
I was thinking more about an ambient agent, because at the end of the day, what I want to get input is from a marketing department, figuring out is there a new market, so some new things. So looking at changes in my invoice stream. So
that's an interesting use case. So you're talking about bringing in like live product documentation as part of this. So that's kind of tricky. Ambient agents is really more of that real-time live, where I think what you're kind of describing is a really great data cloud use case where maybe you have a web crawler on these documentation sites to bring in and ingest that content, and then you're gonna include that as part of your comparison analysis. So I see where your head's at. I do think that would really still more be proactive, but
Yeah.
great.
I think the big part is the trigger here. The invoice comes in, so
Yeah.
so the trigger is that way. So
Yeah. I think we have time for just one more if there's anyone else. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have a upcoming task about a ops developer, ops agent, sorry.
Okay.
So one of the considerations was live analysis of logs.
Okay.
But then I was considering that's a lot of tokens to analyze everything as it comes in. Is that instead more proactive once it hits certain criterias of regex matching or something like that? Does it trigger instead of live stream? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So just to draw that out for everyone, so we have are they like error logs?
I mean,
Yeah.
it would be full analysis of a log stream, so that way when an error log happens, we can see what's surrounding it and make sure that we have the context, which
Yeah.
is why I'm like not really sure which ballpark it falls into.
So keeping that high level, again, I think it kind of comes down to we have our error logs. We're going to do some analysis, and we're doing that kind of from a fixing the issues is probably the reason we're doing this. So great question. I think that's a great dimension to kind of consider. Obviously, to do that in near real time, so at that kind of 15-minute interval, it would consume a lot of tokens. And so I think for that scenario, you might want to think about a nightly, and that would kind of, again, put you more in that proactive space since you aren't kind of doing it in the real time.
But I guess
Anything you'd want to add on that one?
the only way I would go ambient on that one is if like they're not clearly errors that I want to deal with, right? Like at MuleSoft, where I did professional services for a long time, we had alert notifications when things went south, right? And we'd always send it out there, and we'd say like there's warning messages and outage messages essentially. And what we found in like practice is we didn't want the outage messages. We didn't like the warning messages because nobody listened to warning messages, and it was just noise. And so the outage messages were the critical one. So I think if you had an ambient agent that was constantly listening to error logs, it's not necessarily burning the LLMs to start with, right? But because really it's looking at the logs and it's determining whether or not this is like a warning or this is an alert or an outage. And so with your outage and getting your surrounding data that's in there, that could be an ambient pattern because you are constantly learning and trying to correct. But Michelle did bring up a good point that you are burning tokens every single time an error log shows up. So you want to be very careful about how much data you're pushing through.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. I'm going to
think
flip back to the slides. So I'll give you guys a minute if anyone wants to snap a photo. All right, great. So just to kind of close us out, so what did we talk about today? We defined these different patterns and kind of explained the difference between that conversational pattern that we're all familiar with and then these two other patterns, proactive and ambient. Then we talked about the human in the loop, human at the helm shift in mentality and how to apply those best practices as the agent gets more autonomous. And then we also had our decisioning tree, our decisioning matrix to help us decide, based on our job to be done, which pattern should we apply. So thank you all for coming. We did reference both of these documents. If you're not familiar with well-architected framework, please definitely go there. And then this is a great paper published by Salesforce on human at the helm. It has a lot of best practices there and examples on how you can include that into your design process. And thank you for the participation. We really appreciate it. And we will, oh yes, please give us feedback. Help me help you. We do have a team in place, empowered to make decisions, reading your feedback. So please do that, and you might win some coffee, but we really appreciate feedback. And now, Q&A. Please raise your hands if you have any questions.